3,000 years ago, the galaxy decided that humanity was too dangerous to live. The Vorthani Dominion watched Earth from the shadows of space for nearly a century. They studied human history and found endless wars. They watched humans split the atom and create weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. They observed how quickly humans spread across their planet, adapting to every environment, conquering every challenge. The Vorthani had seen many species rise and fall across the galaxy, and they recognized something in humanity that frightened them deeply. Humans were survivors. Humans were fighters. Humans never gave up. Admiral Kethril of the Vorthani Warfleet received his orders on a cold morning in the Earth, year 2157. The message was simple: eliminate the human threat before it spreads beyond their home system. Show no mercy. Leave no survivors. The attack came without warning. Humanity had just begun to establish small colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. They had no real military fleet, only research vessels and cargo ships. They posed no immediate threat to anyone. But the Vorthani did not care about what humans were. They cared about what humans might become. The first orbital strikes hit the major cities. New York vanished in a flash of light. Beijing followed moments later. Moscow, London, Tokyo, Sydney, Cairo, Mumbai. One by one, the great centers of human civilization were reduced to ash and glass. The bombardment continued for 3 days, without pause. When the cities were gone, the Vorthani released biological weapons into the atmosphere. Plagues swept across the continents, killing millions who had survived the initial strikes. Then came the ground forces, hunting down survivors in the ruins, making sure that not a single human remained alive. Admiral Kethril recorded his final report with satisfaction. The human threat has been eliminated. Earth is now a dead world. The galaxy is safer for their absence. The Galactic Confederation received this report and filed it away without comment. The Alori Commonwealth expressed mild concern about the methods used but took no action. The Kreth Mercantile Union calculated the loss of potential future trade partners and moved on to other business. The Zelani Collective added humanity to their registry of extinct species and closed the file. Thanks for watching, and next for watching. No one mourned, no one protested. But the Vorthani had made a mistake. Deep beneath the frozen surface of Antarctica, in bunkers built to survive nuclear war, 200,000 humans slept in cryogenic chambers. The United Nations Emergency Council had constructed these facilities in secret during the final days of Earth. They knew the attack was coming. They could not stop it. But they could ensure that some small part of humanity would survive. The bunkers were designed to be invisible. They generated no heat signatures, broadcast no signals, showed no signs of life. Automated systems monitored the surface and managed the cryogenic pods with perfect efficiency. The plan was simple: wait until the enemy leaves. Wait until the radiation fades. Wait until it is safe to emerge. Nobody expected the wait to last 3,000 years. Commander Nathan Cole was the first to wake. The revival process was slow and painful. His body had been frozen for so long that every cell screamed in protest as warmth returned. He spent 3 days in the medical bay, drifting in and out of consciousness, while the bunker's artificial intelligence briefed him on the state of the world. The AI was called Sentinel, and its voice was calm and emotionless as it delivered news that would have broken a lesser man. Surface radiation levels have returned to acceptable parameters. Atmospheric composition is within survivable range. Time elapsed since initial bombardment is 2,947 years. Global population outside of preservation facilities is estimated at 0. Nathan listened to these words and felt something cold settle into his chest. Everyone he had ever known was dead. His wife Laura had refused to enter the bunkers, choosing instead to stay with her elderly parents in Chicago. His children had been too young to be separated from their mother. He had kissed them goodbye and told them he would see them soon. That was 3,000 years ago. He wanted to scream, He wanted to weep. He wanted to curl up in the darkness and let death take him as it had taken everyone else. But Nathan Cole was a soldier, and soldiers do not have the luxury of despair. There were people depending on him. 190,000 souls, still sleeping in their frozen chambers, waiting to be told that the nightmare was over. He initiated the revival protocols for the command staff. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos woke next. She was a small woman, with dark hair and fierce eyes, and she had been Nathan's second in command since the beginning of the preservation project. When Sentinel told her how long they had been asleep, she simply nodded and asked what needed to be done. Chief Engineer Daniel Park followed. He was a quiet man who preferred machines to people, and his first act upon waking was to run diagnostics on the bunker's systems. He reported that everything was functioning within acceptable parameters, though several backup generators would need replacement within the next decade. Dr. Lisa Morgan was the last of the initial revival group. She was the project's chief medical officer, and she immediately began checking the status of the remaining cryogenic pods. The failure rate was 4.7%, she announced. They had lost about 9,000 people to equipment malfunctions over the centuries. It was a tragedy, but it could have been much worse. Nathan gathered his officers in the command center. Dust hung thick in the air, and the lights flickered as ancient power systems struggled to meet demand. The holographic display showed a map of Earth's surface, and the scars of the bombardment were still visible even after 3 millennia. "We have a choice," Nathan said. His voice was rough from disuse, but his words were clear. "We can stay hidden. We can rebuild quietly and hope that whoever destroyed our world has forgotten we exist. We can live in the shadows and never again reach for the stars." He paused and looked at each of his officers in turn. "Or we can remember what they did to us. We can remember the 8 billion people who died while the galaxy watched and did nothing. We can build something new from the ashes of the old, and we can make sure that no one ever forgets the name of humanity again." Maria's jaw tightened. "They thought they killed all of us. Then let us show them how wrong they were," Nathan replied. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would not hide. Humanity would not cower. Humanity would rise from the grave and reclaim its place among the stars. The real work was about to begin. For 500 years, humanity worked in silence beneath the broken surface of Earth. The bunkers in Antarctica were only the beginning. As more survivors awoke from cryogenic sleep, they discovered that the original planners had thought of everything. Underground tunnels stretched across 3 continents, connecting hidden facilities that contained factories, laboratories, farms, and shipyards. The founders of the preservation project had known that survival alone would not be enough. They had given their descendants the tools to rebuild an entire civilization. Nathan Cole spent the first decade organizing the awakened population. Nearly 200,000 people needed food, shelter, work, and purpose. The cryogenic revival continued in waves, with specialists being awakened according to carefully planned schedules. Engineers came first, then scientists, then farmers, then teachers. Each group had a role to play in the great project of reconstruction. The surface was still too damaged for permanent settlement. Radiation lingered in some areas, and the ecosystem had collapsed completely. But the underground facilities were vast and well supplied. Hydroponic farms produced food. Recycling systems provided clean water and air. Fusion reactors generated power that would last for centuries. Nathan established a governing council to manage the growing population. He called it the United Earth Republic, a name that honored the fallen nations of the Old World while looking forward to something new. The council's first official act was to declare a single overriding goal for all of humanity: the construction of a fleet capable of defending Earth against any threat. They would never be caught helpless again. The first generation worked on the foundations. They expanded the underground facilities, built new manufacturing centers, and began developing the technologies they would need for space travel. Nathan Cole did not live to see the first ship completed. He died at the age of 93, surrounded by his officers and friends, knowing that he had set humanity on the right path. Maria Santos took command after him. She continued his work with the same determination, pushing the scientists to develop faster-than-light engines, and the engineers to design ships that could withstand any weapon. She established military academies deep underground, training soldiers who would one day crew the vessels that did not yet exist. Maria lived for another 40 years. When she died, Daniel Park assumed leadership. When he died, a new generation stepped forward. And so it continued, decade after decade, century after century. Leaders changed, but the mission remained constant. Build the fleet. Prepare for the day of reckoning. By the 300th year after the awakening, humanity had developed faster than light travel. The physics had been theoretical before the bombardment, but generations of brilliant scientists working without interruption had turned theory into reality. Small test craft vanished from underground launch facilities and reappeared at the edge of the solar system. The technology worked perfectly. Admiral Christopher Blake stood in the command center of the Pacific shipyard, watching the latest battleship take shape on the construction dock. He was the great-great-great-grandson of one of the original survivors, and he had dedicated his entire life to the fleet project. Now, at the age of 62, he was finally seeing it reach completion. The ship before him was called Defiance. She was 12 kilometers long, bristling with weapons systems that had been refined over centuries of development. Her armor was made from materials that existed nowhere else in the galaxy, forged in secret laboratories by scientists who had inherited their knowledge from 10 generations of predecessors. Her engines could tear holes in the fabric of space itself. She was beautiful. She was deadly. And she was just one of 50. Captain Catherine Walsh joined him on the observation deck. She was young for her rank, only 42 years old, but she had proven herself in countless simulations and training exercises. She would command Defiance when the fleet finally launched. "That makes 50 battleships," she said, 300 cruisers, 1,000 frigates, and 2 million trained personnel ready to crew them. Christopher nodded slowly. "Is it enough?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "We have studied every piece of intelligence we could gather. Our stealth probes have mapped Confederation space for 2 centuries. We know their ship designs, their tactics, their weaknesses." She paused. "They have no idea we exist. They still think Earth is a dead world. That is our greatest advantage." The intelligence gathered by those probes painted a picture of a galaxy that had grown soft and complacent. The Vorthani Dominion no longer existed, having collapsed from internal conflicts centuries ago. The Elori Commonwealth had risen to become the dominant power, but their military was designed for peacekeeping rather than warfare. The Kreth Mercantile Union cared only for profit. The Zelani Collective had not fought a major battle in 800 years. None of them expected a threat from within their own borders. None of them remembered the species they had allowed to die. Dr. Hannah Cole served as the fleet's chief historian. She was descended from Nathan Cole himself, and she had spent her entire career studying both human history and the records of the Galactic Confederation. She presented her findings to the Admiral in his private office. "We are not even in their current databases," she said. "They deleted all references to Earth centuries ago. To them, humanity is a footnote in ancient history, a failed species that reached too far and paid the price." She smiled grimly. "They have completely forgotten us. Then we will remind them." Christopher replied. The final preparations took another 200 years. The fleet grew larger. The training grew more intense. New technologies were developed and integrated into existing designs. By the time the 500th anniversary of the awakening arrived, humanity possessed the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. The launch ceremony was held in the Great Cavern beneath the Pacific Ocean. 2 million soldiers stood at attention as Admiral Blake addressed them for the last time. "Our ancestors were murdered," he said. 8 billion innocent people were wiped from existence while the galaxy watched and did nothing. We have spent 5 centuries preparing for this moment. We have built ships that can challenge any fleet. We have trained warriors who fear nothing. We are ready." He paused and looked out at the sea of faces before him. "But we do not go forth seeking vengeance. We go to reclaim what was taken from us. We go to show the galaxy that humanity cannot be destroyed. We go to build a future where no species will ever face what we faced. Remember who you are, remember what we have overcome, and remember that today, humanity rises from the grave." The fleet launched in perfect formation. 50 battleships led the way, followed by cruisers and frigates in precise geometric patterns. They rose through the tunnels that connected the underground shipyards to the surface, emerging into the night sky above a planet that was finally beginning to heal. For a long moment, they hung in orbit around Earth. Then, one by one, they activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the darkness between stars. The galaxy was about to receive the shock of its existence. Commander Velshan of the Alory patrol vessel Serenity was aboard. The Kethran Nebula was one of the quietest sectors in Confederation space. Nothing ever happened here. No pirates raided these shipping lanes because there was nothing worth stealing. No smugglers hid in these clouds of gas and dust because there was nowhere to go. Velshan had been assigned to this patrol route as punishment for a minor disagreement with his superiors, and he spent most of his shifts counting the minutes until he could return to civilization. His censor officer was equally bored. The young Aelori, named Tethra, had graduated from the academy only 6 months ago, full of dreams about exciting adventures among the stars. Instead, she spent her days staring at screens that showed nothing but empty space. Until today. "Commander," she said, her voice suddenly sharp with alarm, "I am detecting unknown vessels. Multiple contacts." Velshan straightened in his command chair. His 4 delicate arms, a characteristic of the Alory species, moved unconsciously to the controls. "How many?" Tethra's silver skin grew pale. 53. "No. The count is still rising. Commander, there are over 200 ships, and they are all larger than anything in our database." That was impossible. The Alory Commonwealth maintained the largest fleet in the Confederation, and their biggest battleships were only 3 kilometers long. The idea that anyone could have built something larger without the Commonwealth knowing about it was absurd. Then Velshan looked at the view screen, and his world changed forever. The ships emerged from the depths of the nebula, like ghosts rising from a grave. They were dark shapes against the glowing clouds of gas, moving in perfect formation with a precision that no Confederation fleet could match. The largest of them dwarfed his patrol vessel by a factor of 100. Weapons arrays covered their hulls, and their engines burned with a light that Velshan had never seen before. He had been a naval officer for 30 years. He had seen ships from every major species in the galaxy, but he had never seen anything like this. A communication request appeared on his console. His hand trembled as he accepted it. The face that filled his screen was unlike any species he knew. Soft features covered in pale skin, 2 eyes set above a straight nose, hair the color of dark soil. The being wore a uniform of deep blue, with insignia that meant nothing to Velshan. "This is Admiral Christopher Blake of the United Earth Defense Fleet," the being said. Its voice was calm and steady, showing no fear or aggression. "We come in peace, but we are prepared for war. We request immediate communication with your highest governing authority." Velshan struggled to find words. Earth? That name meant nothing to him. No species in the Confederation came from a world called Earth. "I must ask," he finally managed. "What species are you?" The Admiral's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that might have been satisfaction, or perhaps sorrow. "We are human. We are from Earth, and we have been waiting a very long time to say hello." The news spread faster than light itself. Within hours, every major power in the Confederation knew what had happened. Emergency sessions convened across 100 worlds. Military commanders demanded information about this unknown species and their terrifying fleet. Intelligence agencies scrambled to find any record of a planet called Earth or a species called humanity. What they found shocked them to their core. The archives contained references to Earth, but they were buried deep in ancient records that no one had accessed in centuries. The files described a species that had been deemed too dangerous to exist. The Vorthani Dominion had been authorized to eliminate the human threat before it could spread beyond its home system. The operation had been classified as successful. Humanity was listed as extinct, but the files also contained warnings. Humans were described as aggressive, adaptable, and impossibly resilient. They fought wars constantly, but somehow always survived. They developed technology at a rate that alarmed every species that studied them. They never gave up, never surrendered, never accepted defeat. The Vorthani had attacked Earth precisely because they recognized what humanity could become. And now, 3,000 years later, that potential had been realized. High Mediator Ashran of the Alori Commonwealth called an emergency meeting of the Confederation Council. Representatives from 50 species gathered in the Great Chamber of Council Station, the massive orbital habitat that served as the seat of galactic government. The atmosphere was tense with fear and confusion. Ashran was tall even by Alori standards, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the chamber's soft light. She had served as High Mediator for 40 years, guiding the Confederation through countless crises. But she had never faced anything like this. "The human fleet has taken up position at the edge of Confederation space," she announced. "They have made no aggressive moves. They have responded to all communication attempts with courtesy and patience. But their presence alone has destabilized our entire region." The Kreth representative, a squat creature covered in thick scales, spoke up. "How many ships do they have? What are their capabilities?" "Our analysts estimate over 1,300 vessels," Ashran replied. "The smallest are larger than our heavy cruisers. The largest are 12 kilometers long. Their weapon systems are unlike anything we have encountered." She paused. "If they choose to attack, we cannot stop them." Panic rippled through the chamber. Some representatives demanded immediate military action. Others called for evacuation of border systems. A few suggested surrendering to whatever demands the humans might make. Then the communication screen at the front of the chamber flickered to life. Admiral Christopher Blake appeared, standing on the bridge of his flagship with quiet confidence. The chamber fell silent as every representative turned to watch. "I apologize for the interruption," Blake said. "But I believe it is time for us to speak directly." He looked at the assembled representatives with an expression that was difficult to read. 3,000 years ago, your Confederation watched as my species was nearly destroyed. The Vorthani attacked us without provocation. They killed 8 billion people. And you did nothing. Ashran stepped forward. "Admiral Blake, we are aware of the historical records. The actions of the Vorthani were regrettable, but they acted alone. The Confederation did not sanction their attack." "The Confederation did not stop them either," Blake replied. "You knew what was happening. You chose not to intervene. You allowed genocide to take place. And then you forgot about us entirely." He let those words hang in the air for a long moment. "We have not forgotten. We have spent 5 centuries preparing for this day. We have built a fleet that can challenge any power in this galaxy." He paused. "But we have not come for vengeance. We have come to reclaim our place among the stars. We ask only for 3 things: recognition of our sovereignty, return of our homeworld to our control, and a guarantee that no species will ever again face extinction at the hands of another." Ashran considered his words carefully. "Your demands will be considered. But you must understand that the galaxy has changed since your ancestors walked among the stars. There are protocols, procedures." Blake nodded slowly. "We are willing to follow your protocols. We are willing to wait for your procedures. But we will not wait forever. And we will not disarm simply because our strength makes you uncomfortable." He met Ashran's eyes through the screen. "We learned the cost of being weak. We will not pay that price again." The communication ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The negotiations had begun. Part 4. The Reckoning. The negotiations lasted 3 months, and they nearly destroyed the galaxy. The Confederation Council met with the human delegation in a neutral space station, constructed specifically for this purpose. The station floated in empty space between Earth and Confederation territory, and both sides brought enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Admiral Christopher Blake led the human delegation personally. He was accompanied by Captain Catherine Walsh as his military advisor, and Dr. Hannah Cole as his historical consultant. They faced a team of diplomats from 12 different species, led by High Mediator Ashran herself. The first 2 months went smoothly. The Confederation agreed to recognize Earth as sovereign human territory. They agreed to formally acknowledge the crimes of the Vorthani Dominion. They agreed to establish diplomatic relations with the United Earth Republic and open trade negotiations. But they could not agree on the fleet. "You must disarm," Ashran insisted during the 14th negotiation session. Her voice was calm but firm. No single species can be permitted to maintain such overwhelming military superiority. It destabilizes the entire galactic order. The balance of power that has maintained peace for centuries depends on no one nation being able to defeat all others combined. Catherine Walsh shook her head. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her expression showed no hint of compromise. "With respect, Mediator, the galactic order you speak of allowed 8 billion of our people to be murdered. Your balance of power did nothing to protect them. Forgive us if we do not trust that system to protect us now." The Vorthani acted alone. The Confederation did not sanction their attack. "The Confederation did nothing to prevent it," Catherine replied. "You watched from the safety of your homeworlds while our planet burned. You documented our extinction and filed it away with all the others." She leaned forward. "How many species have been destroyed while your Confederation maintained its precious balance of power? How many innocent peoples have been wiped from existence while you debated protocols and procedures?" Ashran had no answer to that question. The negotiations stalled. Days passed without progress. The human fleet remained in position at the edge of Confederation space. Weapons systems fully charged, the Aelori Commonwealth mobilized its peacekeeping forces. Other species began moving their military assets into defensive positions. For 3 terrifying days, it seemed that war was inevitable. Admiral Blake spent those days in his quarters aboard the flagship, staring at the stars through a small viewport. He had dedicated his entire life to this moment. 500 years of human effort had led to this confrontation. The fate of humanity rested on decisions he would make in the coming hours. Catherine found him there on the 3rd night of the standoff. "The Kreeth have moved their merchant fleet out of the border systems," she reported. "The Zelani are fortifying their defensive perimeters. Everyone expects us to attack." Blake did not turn from the window. "And if we do attack, we will win. Our ships are superior to anything they can field. We could destroy the Confederation fleet in a matter of weeks. But then what? Then we become exactly what they feared we would become." He finally turned to face her. "The Vorthani destroyed Earth because they believed humans were too dangerous to exist. If we prove them right, we lose something far more important than any military victory." Before Catherine could respond, a communication came through from the station. It was Dr. Hannah Cole, and her voice trembled with excitement. "Admiral, you need to come to the conference room immediately. The Zelani have found something." The Zelani historian was named Coraval. She was an elderly member of her species, with deep wrinkles in her pale blue skin and eyes that had seen far too much of the galaxy's darkness. She had spent weeks searching through her people's archives, looking for any record of humanity that might shed light on the current crisis. What she found changed everything. It was a transmission, buried beneath millennia of bureaucratic records, a distress call from Earth, sent during the final days of the Vorthani attack. The message had been received by a Zelani monitoring station and logged according to standard procedure, but no one had ever acted on it. Coraval played the recording for the assembled delegations. The voice that emerged was human, speaking in a language that the translation systems struggled to interpret. "Help us. This is Dr. Benjamin Torres, of the United Nations Emergency Council. Our planet is being destroyed. Orbital bombardments have devastated our major cities. Biological weapons are spreading through the surviving population. Millions are dead. Millions more are dying. We are not a threat to anyone. We have done nothing to deserve this. Please, if anyone can hear us, we need help. The transmission continued for 17 minutes. Benjamin Torres described the attack in horrific detail, his voice growing more desperate with each passing moment. He begged for intervention. He promised anything in exchange for salvation. He listed the names of children who would die if no one came to save them. No one came. The recording ended, and the conference room fell silent. Representatives from a dozen species stared at the floor, unable to meet the eyes of the humans sitting across from them. High Mediator Ashran was the first to speak. Her voice was barely above a whisper. We received this message. We documented it. We filed it away and did nothing. She looked at Admiral Blake with something like shame in her eyes. The Vorthani attacked you, but we allowed it to happen. We heard your cries for help, and we ignored them. Blake listened to the recording 3 times. Each time, he heard the fear in Benjamin Torres's voice. Each time, he imagined what those final days must have been like for the people of Earth. The terror, the desperation, the hope that someone, anyone, would come to save them. No one had come. He stood slowly and addressed the assembled representatives. An apology does not bring back 8 billion lives, he said. Words cannot undo what was done. The dead will remain dead, and no amount of regret will give them justice. He paused, and the entire chamber held its breath. But we did not survive for 3,000 years to become destroyers. We did not build our fleet to conquer or enslave. We built it because we never wanted to feel helpless again. He looked at Ashran. You ask us to disarm. We cannot do that. But we can promise that our weapons will never be used for aggression. We can promise that our fleet will defend those who cannot defend themselves. Ashran considered his words. And what guarantee do we have that you will keep this promise? Blake almost smiled. You have the same guarantee you have always had with every species in this galaxy. Our word, and the hope that we mean what we say. He turned to face the entire assembly. We are not asking you to trust us. We are asking you to give us the chance to prove that we deserve trust. The vote was held the following day. By a narrow margin, the Confederation Council agreed to recognize the United Earth Republic as a sovereign member of the galactic community. They agreed to accept the human fleet's continued existence, with the understanding that it would be used only for defensive purposes. They agreed to establish a joint monitoring system that would track military movements throughout Confederation space. And in a gesture that surprised everyone, High Mediator Ashran offered a formal apology on behalf of the Galactic Confederation. We cannot undo what was done, she said. We cannot bring back the dead. But we can acknowledge our failure and commit to ensuring that such a tragedy never happens again. On behalf of all the peoples of this confederation, I offer our deepest apology to humanity. We should have saved you. We did not. That shame will follow us forever. Admiral Blake accepted the apology with grace. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. He ordered the fleet to stand down. 10 years after first contact, humanity had changed the galaxy forever. Earth was healing. Terraforming technology provided by guilty Confederation species accelerated the restoration process. Forests spread across continents that had been barren for 3,000 years. Rivers flowed through channels that had been choked with ash and debris. Animals were reintroduced from genetic samples preserved in the underground bunkers, and slowly, carefully, the ecosystem began to recover. Cities rose from the ruins of the old world. They were not built on the graves of the ancient metropolises, but in new locations, chosen for their strategic value and natural beauty. The capital of the United Earth Republic was established on a peninsula overlooking the Pacific Ocean, where the morning sun painted the water in shades of gold and orange. The population grew. Children were born under open skies for the first time in 5 centuries. They played in parks and swam in lakes, and looked up at the stars without fear. They learned about the long darkness their ancestors had endured, but they did not carry the same weight of grief and anger. They were the first generation of a new humanity, shaped by hope rather than trauma. But the Republic did not forget. The fleet remained. Admiral Christopher Blake, now serving as President Blake, maintained the military strength that had brought humanity back from the edge of extinction. New ships were built to replace aging vessels. New technologies were developed and integrated into existing designs. The academies continued to train soldiers who understood both the horror of war and the necessity of strength. Some in the Confederation complained. They argued that humanity's military power was excessive, that it threatened the balance they had worked so long to maintain. President Blake listened to their concerns with patience and then politely refused to change course. "We will never again be helpless," he said in an address to the Confederation Council. "We will never again watch our children die while others debate whether to help us. Our fleet exists not because we wish to conquer, but because we refuse to be conquered. That is not a threat. It is simply who we are." Captain Catherine Walsh had risen to the rank of admiral. She commanded the Rapid Response Fleet, a force of 100 vessels that patrolled the borders of Confederation space and responded to emergencies throughout the galaxy. Her ships were always the first to arrive when disaster struck, whether the cause was natural or deliberate. When a rogue faction threatened to destroy the Pellerin homeworld, Catherine's fleet arrived within hours. The aggressors had expected weeks to complete their assault before anyone could intervene. Instead, they found themselves facing human battleships with weapons charged and targeting systems locked. The faction surrendered without firing a shot. When a massive earthquake devastated the Kreeth colony of New Prosperity, human relief ships appeared before the Kreeth government could even assess the damage. Medical teams deployed to the surface, bringing supplies and expertise that saved thousands of lives. The Kreeth had never asked for help. Humanity had simply decided to give it. These actions did not go unnoticed. Species that had once feared humanity began to reconsider their opinions. The humans were powerful. Yes, their fleet was terrifying. But they used that power to protect rather than to conquer. They asked for nothing in return for their assistance. They simply helped because helping was the right thing to do. President Blake announced the Extinction Prevention Compact during his address to the Confederation Council on the 10th anniversary of First Contact. "No species should ever face what we faced," he said. "No world should burn while others watch and do nothing. From this day forward, the United Earth Republic pledges to defend any species threatened with extinction, regardless of their membership in the Confederation, regardless of their political alignment, regardless of whether they can ever repay us." He paused and looked around the chamber at representatives from 50 different species. "We know what it feels like to be alone in the darkness. We know the despair of crying out for help and hearing only silence. We will not allow others to feel that way. If you are threatened, we will come. If you are dying, we will try to save you. This is our promise, and we will keep it until the last human ship falls silent." The compact was signed by 37 species in the first year. By the end of the decade, over 100 had joined. Humanity had become the protectors of the galaxy, the guardians against extinction, the last hope for species that had nowhere else to turn. Dr. Hannah Cole lived to see the 100th anniversary of the awakening. She was very old by then, her body frail, and her movements slow, but her mind remained sharp, and she gave an interview that was broadcast across the entire Confederation. The interviewer was a young Aelori journalist named Veltan, who had grown up hearing stories about the terrifying human fleet and the mysterious species that had returned from the dead. "They tried to destroy us because they feared what we might become," Hannah said. Her voice was soft but steady. "The Vorthani looked at humanity and saw a threat. They saw our wars and our weapons and our endless drive to survive, and they decided that the galaxy would be safer without us." She smiled, and there was something fierce in her eyes despite her age. They were right to be afraid. We became exactly what they feared. We became a species that would not be broken, that would not surrender, that would rise from the ashes stronger than before. We built ships that could challenge empires. We trained soldiers who feared nothing. We became the most powerful military force in galactic history. Veltan leaned forward. But you did not use that power for conquest. No, Hannah agreed. And that is what the Vorthani failed to understand. They thought that power inevitably leads to domination. They could not imagine that a species might choose to use its strength for protection rather than control. She shook her head slowly. Humans are capable of terrible things. Our history is full of war and cruelty and suffering. But we are also capable of something else. Something that frightened the Vorthani more than all our weapons combined. What is that? Hope, Hannah said. We hoped that the galaxy could be better. We hoped that suffering could be prevented. We hoped that our children would live in a universe where no one would have to experience what we experienced. She looked directly at the camera. And we were stubborn enough to make that hope a reality. The battleship Defiance still flies today. She is a museum now, preserved in orbit around Earth as a reminder of what humanity endured and what they built from the ruins. School children visit her every day, walking through corridors that once carried soldiers to the edge of war. They touch the bulkheads and wonder at the courage of those who served aboard her. At the entrance to the bridge, there is an inscription carved into a metal plaque. The words were chosen by Admiral Christopher Blake himself, and they have become a motto for all of humanity. They thought us extinct. They were wrong. We are humanity. We remember. We endure. We rise. Far across the galaxy, on 100 different worlds, other species look up at the stars and know that they are not alone. If the worst should come, if extinction looms on their horizon, the humans will come. The humans always come. Because humanity remembers what it felt like to have no one come for them, and they refuse to let anyone else feel that way ever again. The stars shine down on a galaxy transformed. Where once there was fear and suspicion, now there is hope. Where once there was silence in the face of suffering, now there are ships racing to help. Where once humanity was alone and dying, now they stand as guardians for all who need protection. The darkness tried to swallow them. It failed. Humanity awakened, and the galaxy will never be the same.